The coffee shop was almost empty when Michael pushed open the glass door, his suit jacket damp from the drizzle. The clock ticked past midnight, and soft jazz hummed from the speakers. Emma wiped the counter, her eyes drawn to the tall man whose presence carried a heaviness he never spoke of. Michael said, "One black coffee, no sugar." His voice was low, tired, yet it carried an authority that silenced the room. Emma nodded, forcing a smile as she poured the drink. She wondered why a man dressed like a king would sit alone in a corner every night. Michael settled into his usual spot, staring at the steam rising from his cup, as though searching for answers inside the dark liquid. Emma said, "You've been coming here a lot." He looked up, startled, before replying softly, "It's the only place that feels alive after midnight." Something in his eyes whispered loneliness, but his lips refused to admit it. Emma noticed how Michael always avoided small talk, as though words cost more than the coffee he bought. Tonight, though, silence pressed harder. She leaned on the counter, wiping the same spot again, before saying, "You must like late hours." Michael raised his brow, lips curling faintly. "They're quieter." His tone held the weight of a man used to commanding boardrooms, but weary of conversations that meant nothing. Emma laughed softly, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "Or maybe you just like the coffee." His gaze lingered on her longer than usual, his cup half raised. For a moment, his eyes softened, hinting at a man beneath the armor. Michael finally replied, "Maybe it's both." Emma turned away, hiding her blush in the steam of another order, unaware that his silence was beginning to fill with something else. The hours dragged as the rain tapped against the windows, and Emma grew bold enough to steal glances between wiping tables. Michael noticed and set his cup down, his voice low. "You always work this late?" Emma smirked, hiding her nerves. Someone has to keep the night alive. The exchange felt small, but beneath it, something unspoken stirred. Michael's phone buzzed on the table, flashing a picture of a little girl as his wallpaper. Emma caught sight, curiosity flashing in her eyes. He noticed her gaze and turned the screen down, tension clouding his face. "Daughter?" Emma asked gently. Michael's jaw tightened before he nodded. "Yes." The single word carried both love and burden. Emma wanted to ask more, but she sensed the invisible wall he carried with him. Still, the question hung between them like unfinished music. Emma couldn't shake the image of the child's face. As she cleaned a nearby table, she stole another look at Michael, noticing how his shoulders seemed weighed down by invisible chains. "She looks sweet," Emma said softly. Michael froze for a heartbeat before replying, "She is." His voice carried pride, but the sadness beneath it was unmistakable. He rubbed his temple, as though holding back words. Emma pulled out a chair across from him, surprising herself with the boldness. Sometimes coffee tastes better when it's shared. He looked at her sharply, then softened, his lips twitching with the ghost of a smile. The storm outside rumbled, and for the first time, he didn't seem so distant. Michael finally said, "Maybe I've been drinking it wrong." Emma laughed quietly, the sound mixing with the rain like a fragile promise. The storm grew louder, filling the pauses between their words. Michael stared at his reflection in the dark coffee, while Emma tapped her fingers lightly on the table, breaking the silence. "You know, most people come here for company, not just caffeine." Michael's eyes lifted, unreadable. "Maybe I'm not most people." His tone was firm, yet it carried the ache of confession. Emma tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Maybe that's what makes you interesting." The words lingered longer than she expected, and Michael's lips pressed together as if holding back an answer. The hum of jazz filled the space between them, but the air had changed. Emma realized this man wasn't just a customer. He was a story, unfolding one sip at a time. And though he guarded himself like a fortress, she was beginning to find cracks in the stone. Emma noticed Michael staring at his phone again, thumb hovering over the screen as though debating a call he couldn't make. She said, "She must be special." His eyes flickered, caught off guard. "My daughter," he replied, voice softer than usual, almost breaking through his armor. Emma leaned forward slightly, drawn in by the hint of vulnerability. You don't talk about her much. Michael exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening as though every word cost him. There's not much to say. She deserves better than me working late nights, and hiding in coffee shops. The honesty startled Emma, and she offered a smile that carried warmth instead of judgment. For the first time he didn't look away. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with questions neither dared to ask yet. The coffee machine hissed as Emma refilled a pot, her back turned, though her ears lingered on his silence. Michael finally said, "She's bright stubborn. She reminds me too much of her mother." Emma paused, recognizing the sharp edge of memory in his voice. She turned with a gentle smile, trying to soften it. "Sounds like she keeps you on your toes." Michael chuckled faintly, the sound rare and disarming. "She doesn't let me forget I'm human." Emma set the pot down, the steam fogging the counter briefly. "Maybe that's exactly what you need." He studied her face as though weighing her sincerity, then took another slow sip of coffee. For the first time, the bitterness in his cup didn't feel as sharp, and he wondered if the company made it sweeter. The night grew quieter, the storm outside fading into a steady drizzle. Emma leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, her curiosity no longer masked. "Why here?" she asked softly. Michael tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly as he searched for an answer. "Because it's safe. Nobody asks questions." She smiled faintly, not letting him escape so easily. "I just did." His lips curved, just slightly, at her boldness. "Then maybe you're different." She stepped closer, her voice dropping lower. "Maybe I just care enough to notice." The space between them tightened, not with touch but with something more fragile. Michael held her gaze, and for once he didn't hide behind silence. That unspoken moment stretched, trembling with possibilities neither dared to name. Emma wiped down a clean table just to keep her hands busy. Michael's presence weighed heavy, not in burden but in intensity. He finally spoke. "Most people think CEOs don't get lonely. They think success fills the silence." His words hung in the air, sharp but vulnerable. Emma turned, her eyes soft, voice steady. "Success doesn't keep you warm at night." Michael met her gaze, lips pressing into a line that betrayed how much truth pierced him. "You talk like you've lived it." Emma's smile was small, almost sad. "Loneliness isn't picky, it visits everyone." For a fleeting second, something shifted in his expression, a recognition, maybe even relief, that he wasn't the only one carrying shadows in the quiet hours. The clock ticked closer to 1, and the shop felt more like a confession booth than a cafe. Michael stared into his empty cup before saying, "I come here because it's easier than going home sometimes." His voice cracked slightly, raw with truth. Emma's chest tightened, but she didn't look away. "Maybe home doesn't have to be a place," she said gently. "Maybe it's someone who listens." Michael's eyes lingered on her, shadows softening in their depth. He opened his mouth, then closed it, the words swallowed by fear of what honesty might cost. Emma felt the weight of the silence but didn't push. Instead, she offered him another cup, her hand steady, her heart racing. For the first time, he didn't refuse. The rain had eased into mist, streaking faint silver trails down the glass. Michael sat quieter than usual, his hand brushing over the phone he had face down on the table. Emma dared to ask, "Does she know you come here?" His jaw stiffened, his gaze avoiding hers. "No," he said firmly. Emma softened her voice, pressing gently. "Would she understand if you told her?" He exhaled, a sound caught between a sigh and a laugh. "She already thinks I spend too much time away. She doesn't need to know I'm hiding too." Emma's chest tightened at his confession, at the man who carried both power and regret in equal measure. He looked up then, eyes heavy with a truth he rarely let escape. "I come here because I can't tell her I'm lonely." Emma lingered near his table longer than usual, folding a napkin slowly, just to give her hands purpose. Michael broke the silence with a low murmur. "Her name's Lily." The words came softly, as if spoken to himself. Emma's lips curved, testing the name in the air. Lily, pretty. For the first time, Michael smiled. Not the faint twitch of lips, but something genuine, fleeting, fragile. She paints the walls with her crayons. She believes I can fix anything. His eyes darkened. But I can't even fix myself. Emma felt the weight of his honesty and resisted the urge to reach across. Instead, she offered softly, maybe she doesn't want you fixed. Maybe she just wants you there. His silence confirmed she had struck a truth he couldn't deny. Emma gathered her courage, sliding into the seat across from him without asking. Michael raised a brow, but for once he didn't protest. You remind me of her, he admitted, voice low, eyes narrowing as though testing his own thought. Emma tilted her head, curious. Why's that? His lips curved faintly. Because you see me, even when I try not to be seen. The words disarmed her, leaving heat rushing to her cheeks. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked under the weight of his gaze. Michael leaned back, his shoulders still tense, but his eyes softer than she had ever seen. That's dangerous, he murmured. Emma swallowed, steadying herself. Sometimes dangerous is worth it. Their silence afterward burned with unspoken fire. The storm outside picked up again, thunder rumbling low as though echoing the tension between them. Michael's phone buzzed, and Lily's face flashed on the screen. He turned it over quickly, but Emma had already seen. You don't answer, she asked softly. He rubbed his temple, voice rough. Not when I don't know what to say. Emma leaned closer, lowering her voice. Sometimes silence says enough. He looked at her then, torn between gratitude and guilt. I don't want her to see this side of me. Emma's hand brushed the table, not touching his but close enough to feel the pull. She deserves your truth, just like you do. For a long beat, he said nothing, but his eyes confessed what his lips refused. The rain hammered harder, drowning the hum of the jazz. Michael clenched his fists on the table, his composure slipping. People see a CEO, a man in control. They don't see the nights I can't breathe. Emma's heart twisted, her voice firm yet tender. Maybe that's why you're here, to remember you don't have to hold it all alone. He studied her, searching her eyes as if they held answers he lost long ago. You talk like you know what that feels like. Emma smiled faintly, pain flickering behind it. Loneliness and I are old friends. Their eyes locked, storm reflecting in both, as though the world outside mirrored the one within. The moment stretched, fragile yet unbreakable, as if something new was being written between them. The storm had passed, leaving the night clearer, the windows fogged with warmth. Emma brought Michael a refill without asking, placing it gently before him. You're starting to look less like a customer and more like furniture, she teased. Michael smirked faintly, leaning back. Comfortable then? She raised a brow, smiling. Depends. Furniture doesn't brood this much. His laugh surprised them both, low but real. The sound eased the heaviness that usually lingered between them. For a fleeting moment, he looked younger, freer, as if the weight of his empire had loosened its grip. Emma caught herself staring too long, warmth blooming where restraint used to be. He noticed, and instead of retreating, he let her see. Emma cleared empty cups, humming softly under her breath. Michael tilted his head, listening longer than necessary. You sing? He asked suddenly. She laughed, shaking her head. Only when no one's listening. He leaned forward, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I'm no one then? The playful challenge surprised her, heat rising to her cheeks. You're someone, she admitted quietly, avoiding his eyes as she wiped the counter. The words slipped heavier than she intended. Michael's smirk faded into something softer, gaze resting on her with unspoken gratitude. For once, silence wasn't heavy. It was tender, like a song neither of them had realized they'd started humming together. Michael set his phone on the table, screen glowing with a half-finished drawing in bright crayon colors. She made this for me, he murmured. Emma leaned closer, studying the messy rainbow scribbles with genuine delight. It's beautiful. Lily must be proud. He smiled faintly, a softness rare on his features. She says I don't smile enough, so she draws me sunshine. Emma chuckled, brushing a curl behind her ear. Smart girl, she knows what you need. He watched Emma's expression as she admired the picture, his chest tightening at the thought of both worlds colliding, his daughter and the woman across from him. For the first time, it didn't feel impossible. Emma leaned on the counter, studying him with boldness she hadn't allowed before. You hide behind coffee, but you're not as untouchable as you think. Michael arched a brow, intrigued. And what do you see? Her lips curved knowingly. A man who wants to be seen but doesn't know how. His eyes lingered on hers, unreadable, yet softened. Dangerous words, he muttered. She laughed gently, shaking her head. No, honest ones. For the first time he didn't deflect, didn't turn away. Instead, he leaned closer, voice lower, steadier. Then maybe you see too much. The distance between them shrank, not in inches but in walls finally crumbling. The cafe clock ticked toward closing, shadows stretching long across the floor. Emma gathered the last cups while Michael lingered in his booth, reluctant to leave. She approached, her voice softer now. You don't always have to carry it alone. His gaze lifted, steady, almost vulnerable. You make it sound easy. She smiled faintly. Not easy, just lighter. He studied her, the weight in his eyes momentarily giving way to something else, longing, quiet but undeniable. He opened his mouth as if to say more, but the words stayed trapped. Emma didn't push, she only held his gaze until the silence between them became an answer all its own. The next night, Emma found herself glancing at the door every time it opened, but Michael didn't come. When he finally appeared 2 days later, his steps were heavier, his eyes colder. He ordered without meeting her gaze. Emma forced a smile, trying to bridge the distance. Row day, she asked. He replied flatly, just coffee. The dismissal stung, sharper than she expected. She delivered his cup, setting it down with care, but his silence built a wall between them. She had grown used to the warmth in his gaze, the rare laughs, the quiet honesty, but tonight, it was gone. The space between them felt wider than the room itself, and Emma realized he was retreating back into the fortress she had only begun to breach. Emma wiped down the counter with more force than needed, frustration simmering beneath her calm face. Michael sat in silence, scrolling through his phone, ignoring the world around him. Finally, she broke. You don't have to shut me out. His gaze lifted slowly, unreadable. It's better this way. Her heart clenched at the finality in his tone. Better for who? She whispered, but he didn't answer. Instead, he sipped his coffee, his expression hardening with every second. Emma turned away, blinking back a sting in her eyes. She had given him pieces of her truth, and now, he was pulling away as if they had never mattered. The quiet between them wasn't safety anymore, it was exile. The cafe felt colder despite the warm lamps. Michael's visits became shorter, his words fewer, his eyes hidden behind a mask of indifference. Emma brought his coffee, placing it down without speaking. He glanced at her briefly, something flickering before it was buried again. She said softly, You don't have to pretend with me. Michael shook his head. Pretending is easier than being seen. The words struck her like ice, and she realized he wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting her from the storm he carried inside. But Emma's chest burned, unwilling to be kept at arm's length. She wanted to remind him that loneliness wasn't solved by distance, but tonight, her voice broke before it reached him. Emma couldn't bear the silence anymore. She walked over, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table between them. Talk to me, Michael. His jaw tightened, his eyes avoiding hers. I can't give you what you're looking for. She shook her head, her voice firm though her chest ached. I never asked for anything but honesty. His gaze snapped to hers then, sharp, filled with conflict. For a moment, she thought he would break, that the truth would spill out, but instead he pulled back, retreating deeper into himself. Emma's hands slipped away from the table. Empty, her heart heavier than the night outside. Closing time came with an ache Emma couldn't shake. She stacked chairs, her movements heavy, while Michael lingered at the booth, staring into his empty cup. Finally, he stood, slipping on his jacket. "Thank you," he said quietly, his tone polite, distant, final. Emma's throat tightened, but she managed, "Good night, Michael." He paused at the door, his silhouette framed by the neon glow, and for the briefest moment, he looked back, his eyes betraying regret. But then he stepped into the night, leaving the warmth behind him. Emma stood in the empty cafe, the silence no longer comforting, but cutting, as if his absence had stolen more than his presence ever gave. Michael didn't show for several nights, and Emma convinced herself he was gone for good. But then near closing, the door opened, and there he was, exhausted, unshaven, his tie loose, his shoulders heavy. He sat without ordering, staring at the table. Emma hesitated before bringing coffee, placing it down gently. "You look like the world's winning," she said softly. He gave a humorless laugh. "It always does." His voice cracked on the edges, stripped of its usual command. Emma sat across from him without asking, her eyes steady. "Then maybe it's time you stopped fighting it alone." For the first time, he didn't resist. His silence wasn't a wall anymore. It was surrender. Michael rubbed his face as if trying to erase the exhaustion carved into him. "She asked why I'm never home," he murmured, voice raw. Emma leaned closer, her tone tender. "What did you say?" His lips pressed tight. "That I'm working. But the truth is, I don't know how to be the father she deserves." Emma's chest ached at the honesty spilling from him. "You're here," she said simply. "That counts for more than you think." He shook his head, staring into his cup. "Here isn't enough. Not for her. Not for me." Emma reached out, her fingers brushing the table close to his hand, not touching but near enough to matter. Maybe enough is simply being willing to try. The hum of jazz filled the silence, and Michael's voice dropped lower, as if confessing to the night itself. "I built everything, companies, wealth, power, and none of it fills the empty space when she asks for me." His hand trembled slightly on the cup. Emma's gaze softened, her words careful but steady. "Love isn't measured by what you build. It's measured by who you show up for." He looked at her, his chest rising with a sharp inhale, as if her words cut too close. "And what if I fail her?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Then you get up, and you try again. That's what fathers do." His throat tightened, and he lowered his gaze, but a fragile hope flickered in his eyes. Emma rose from her seat, walked around the table, and sat across from him again, closer this time. Michael looked up, startled, but didn't pull back. "You are so busy being strong that you don't realize strength looks like this," she said softly. He frowned. "Like what?" She held his gaze, unwavering. "Letting someone see you when you are breaking." His shoulders sagged, the weight of years pressing down, and he whispered, "I don't know how." Emma's lips curved faintly, her voice steady. "You're already doing it." The words sank into him, and for the first time he didn't hide his face. Instead he let her see the man behind the title. The clock ticked past 1, but neither moved. Michael's hand finally drifted across the table, resting near hers, not touching but close enough to break the barrier. His voice was hoarse. "I don't let people in." Emma's chest tightened, her reply soft. "Then start with me." He studied her, searching for doubt, but her gaze didn't waver. Something shifted in his expression, a fracture in the walls he had built, letting light spill through. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't empty or cold. It was full, charged, fragile, and alive. Emma's heart raced, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to let her in. The following evening, Emma was closing the cafe when the door opened, and this time, Michael wasn't alone. A young girl clutched his hand, her hair tied in playful braids, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Emma froze, her heart leaping as Michael introduced her softly. "Emma, this is Lily." The girl peeked out from behind her father, her dark brown eyes full of curiosity and shy wonder. Emma crouched down, her smile warm and welcoming. "Hi, Lily. I've heard a lot about you." Lily grinned, tilting her head. "Daddy said, this is where the magic coffee comes from." Michael chuckled under his breath. The sound easier than Emma had ever heard before. She felt the moment stretch, fragile yet beautiful, the first thread of something larger than either of them alone. For the first time, she saw Michael not just as a man carrying loneliness, but as a father opening the door to his world. Emma prepared a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream while Lily climbed onto the booth seat, legs swinging with excitement. Michael sat beside her, his posture relaxed for once, his gaze following every motion with quiet affection. "This place smells like vanilla," Lily said, nose wrinkling adorably. Emma laughed, sliding the cup toward her. "That's because I like sweetness." Lily dipped a finger in the cream, giggling. "Daddy doesn't. He only drinks coffee as black as his suits." Michael gave a helpless smile, shaking his head, but his eyes sparkled in a way Emma had never seen. For a while, the cafe filled with Lily's chatter and Emma's laughter, the heaviness of the nights before replaced by something brighter. Michael leaned back, watching the two of them, realizing how natural it felt, how dangerous it was to want this, and how impossible it was to deny. As Lily colored on a napkin with borrowed pens, Emma leaned across the counter toward Michael. "She's wonderful," she whispered. His eyes softened, following his daughter's every scribble. "She's everything." The words carried both pride and weight, and Emma heard the fear beneath them. "She looks happy with you," Emma said gently. Michael sighed, his jaw tightening. "She doesn't see the nights I fail, the nights I can't be both father and whatever I am out there." Emma placed her hand lightly over his on the counter, steady and unafraid. "She doesn't need perfect, Michael. She needs you." His throat worked as he looked from Emma's hand to her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement that she wasn't just speaking for Lily, but for herself too. Later, as Lily yawned and leaned against her father's arm, Michael stood to gather her things. Emma followed him to the door, her steps slower, reluctant for the night to end. "Thank you," he said softly, his eyes holding hers longer than they should. Emma shook her head, her smile faint but full of meaning. "You don't have to thank me. You belong here." His breath caught, his hand tightening slightly on Lily's backpack strap. For so long, belonging had felt impossible, but in her words, he heard the echo of a home he never knew he was searching for. The silence stretched, charged with the weight of unspoken confessions, until Lily stirred, pulling him back. Still, he didn't look away, as though afraid that if he did, he'd lose something he couldn't afford to. The night ended, but Emma couldn't stop replaying the moment he looked back before leaving, something in his eyes finally unshackled. 2 nights later, he returned alone, rain dripping from his coat. He paused at the counter, then moved closer, his presence heavier, more certain. "Emma," he said quietly, the sound of her name carrying more than a greeting. She wiped her hands nervously, her heart racing. "Michael." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers as though gathering courage. "You've given me more than coffee. You've given me a place to breathe." The words hung, raw and undeniable. Emma's chest tightened, her reply trembling but sure. "And you've given me someone worth waiting for." Silence filled the room, but this time, it wasn't distance, it was gravity. He reached across the counter, his fingers brushing hers, and the space between them finally closed, not with words but with truth.